Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to Mr. Daniel Graves from Aesthetic Perfection.
Hello, hello.
So good to have you here, and thank you for wanting to do this interview with me.
My pleasure. I always have fun doing these things.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I have a bunch of questions lined up
I have a
for
bunch
you.
of answers, I hope.
We'll see how it goes, and if there's any question I ask that you don't feel like answering, just tell me. I generally try and keep people's boundaries in mind, so we'll see how it goes.
All right.
And for me on my end, there's no time constraint at all, so we have time enough.
All right.
So I guess a good start would be the typical tell us more about yourself.
Ugh, that's a hard question to answer because
Well,
39 going on 40. It's a whole lot of information to try to Cliff's Notes version, shoehorn into a couple of seconds or into a soundbite. I guess sort of the 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 shortest version that I can come up with on the spot would be my name is Daniel. I'm an electronic musician. I'm 39 years old. I'm American. I am currently residing in Austria and uh, I do this art thing full time.
cool. So this art thing is of course music. Um, Mostly, I assume, unless there's something secret I don't know about.
Oh no, 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 no. I'm terrible at every other sort of discipline other than music, and I would probably argue that I'm not even that good at music. So, uh, I would love to be a writer, but I just don't have the time to be good at it. So I'll save my writing for social media posts.
Mm,
Yeah, no, I'm just a musician.
just a musician, he says. People in the comments are like, this is a perfect answer and this art thing is awesome.
Well,
So,
thank you.
what
And
made.
yeah, I've got the chat here too, so don't worry. I'm
Okay,
trying to follow along as
cool,
best I can. Yeah.
cool. What made you decide that you wanted to do music?
I grew up in conservative Christian households during the 80s and 90s, which was a time known as the Satanic Panic. Um, it was a moral panic that sort of really captured the hearts and minds of many, many people in the US, but especially conservative Christians. And I grew up in a household where, you know, exorcisms were performed regularly on me, where I had to speak in tongues, going to Christian school. And all the cool stuff was totally off limits. So, you know, uh, uh, couldn't see the Ninja Turtles movie. So I was lucky if I could talk my family into letting me see Star Wars
Oh,
because the
wow.
Force is evil. Like it was, it was a very sheltered existence. And when my family wasn't around, I would be in the den, the TV room, and I would switch to MTV and I would watch just as much of the forbidden sort of channel as I could before I hear footsteps coming down the hall, and I'd quickly change away, to Nickelodeon or something.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was this the taboo nature of like rock and roll was just so enticing to me. And the older I got, the more rebellious I got, the
Yeah, of
more willing I
course.
was to push all of this stuff away. And I don't know, it just seemed obvious to me at a very, very young age that music was going to be the path I would follow.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Oh, what a background. There really is some truth to like small American towns, I guess, and all the awful stereotypes that sometimes follow when you're a bit different and want to make music and stuff. Um, we're back. Yeah, my internet just decided to go.
It's all right.
That's typical. Whenever there's something important I have to do, the internet just goes.
Yeah.
Hopefully
No, I
that'll
know.
be the only hiccup tonight.
I look, I know the feeling. I live on the countryside in the middle of Austria. We don't even have like cabled internet here.
Oh.
So yeah, the townsfolk are still debating whether or not they want to lay fiber optic
Mhm.
cable, and if they do vote in favor of it, it's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So by the time that they
Oh.
actually lay the cable, it'll be completely obsolete. So
Oh
welcome to
man.
welcome to countryside living.
Yeah, I totally get it. I live kind of in the suburbs in my little town here in Denmark, so
Mm.
yeah, it's what it is. Also, hi to all the newcomers in chat. Hell Boulevard TV, I see you. Hi. Um, and yeah, as I was saying before we got cut off, I guess it is what it is sometimes coming from small towns with having big restrictions, especially if it's more in the religious community and stuff.
Mm.
Um,
But I actually wasn't from a small town. I'm from the suburbs of LA.
oh,
So
oh, okay, I
um,
see.
um, I think for most people, they would know this area by the TV show The OC, if that was a thing out here in Europe. I was lived in Orange County, which is just basically this very conservative enclave just on the outskirts of Los Angeles. So it's where Disneyland is.
Ah,
So
okay.
I grew up about 10 minutes away from Disneyland, which is ironic because that whole area is just really devoted to entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, very sort of conservative enclave there, and uh, it was really funny because you know, I haven't been back there in decades, and a couple of years ago, uh, I was invited by my friend Ryan from the band Julian K to go try and eat, and he was also an orgy, of course. Um, he invited me to go to one of his restaurants
Mm-hmm.
that he had in Orange County. So I made the trek and I drove all the way out to Orange County and I got to this restaurant and I got to the parking lot and I looked across the street and I'm like, I do not believe this. This is my Christian school across the street. So I
Yeah,
hadn't
that
been
must have
back
been
to this
wild.
place in 30, you know, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just seeing this place again was like, sent chills down my spine. But yeah, definitely an interesting upbringing for sure.
So, now that we've established you're in a band and stuff, what prompted the name Aesthetic Perfection? Where does it come from? Was it just something that seemed a good idea, or?
I mean, I have to say that if I could go back and not use a band name,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't because I feel like like as a solo project, people connect more to personalities, to individuals than they do to bands. So I actually wouldn't even have a band name. And if I could, and if I had to have a band name, it certainly would not be Aesthetic Perfection because nobody can ever spell it. And whenever I'm like trying to give anybody my email address, it is a complete nightmare. It, you know, I'm sitting there trying to spell it out like or Aesthatt.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, what? Back up. And so that's terrible. But but the sort of genesis of it was just that you know, I grew up in the suburbs of LA, you know, spending my weekends going into the city and being surrounded by the beautiful people, right? The people who are obsessed with beauty, the people who are obsessed with being perfect, the people who will do, say, and pay whatever it takes to be perfect. So for me, it just seemed like a reflection of where I came from, while also sort of addressing the overarching philosophical or existential question of like, is perfection real?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is something that has stayed with me over the, you know, 2+ decades that I've been doing this. So I don't really have an answer to that question. I mean, I don't think so, but you never know.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. I mean, not all questions can be answered in just one word, you know.
Mm.
Um, where did my list of questions go? Here. So, has there been any bands that influenced you the most? And are there any surprises amongst your influences?
I mean, it depends on who you ask because for me, um, genre has never been anything that was important to me.
Hmm.
I think, especially, in the 80s and 90s, and early 2000s, people very, very seriously identified with subcultures because I think that it wasn't just about the music, it was about the community, it was about the tribal nature of these things. But I was always a loner. Um, Never really had a clique, never really had a stable group of friends that were from one scene or another. And I grew up loving all kinds of music. So of course, like I sort of focused onto like darker, edgier music. But while I was listening to Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson, I was
Hmm.
also a diehard fan of Dave Matthews Band. Now, I don't know if people in Denmark know who Dave Matthews Band is, but it is like honky tonk acoustic uh,
I
uh,
mean,
uh, college rock.
I,
Uh,
I, I, I grew up in a family who listened to a lot of older music, so I may have
mm,
heard it at some point in passing thanks to my dad or something.
mm.
So I'm not gonna rule it out, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, it's not like classic rock. They were a contemporary band at the time. I think they came out, sort of broke commercially around the same time as Marilyn Manson,
Hmm.
and I was just really into anything that was good. And I remember being as um, influenced as a producer by Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style as I was by the Downward Spiral,
Oh, that's
because
cool.
because I just appreciate good music, and I think that being a loner has its drawbacks, right? Like I'm very um socially awkward. I've I'm not very good at making friends. I still don't have that many friends.
I feel
Um
that.
but it also gave me sort of the perspective creatively to not sort of rule things out based on, you know, the aesthetic,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, I was just as big a fan of Snoop Dogg and Dave Matthews Band as I was Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson. And I distinctly remember people. I'm not going to name names because I it seems pointless, but there were a lot of other big bands sort of in the industrial scene at that time, and I remember people saying, "Oh, if you like Manson, if you like Nails, you're gonna like X, Y, and Z."
Mm.
And so I would go buy those records because you couldn't like stream them on Spotify at the time. You actually had to go to the record
Yeah.
store, buy the record, and listen to it. And I was always like, "This is terrible," because Nails and Manson, they were writing pop songs, right, just with sort of an edge,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
I mean, they
and
got
then
commercial broadcast and everything.
yeah, there was a reason, right, why they were popular, not just because of the controversy, but because they did write very well-crafted pop songs, and so when I'm buying these records, these import records for like 20 $25, which at the time was just insane for a
Hmm.
teenager, you're like bitter and angry about the fact that you spent so much money. And for me, it was like these songs are all like 6 minutes long, and where's the hook? The production is terrible, and I'm trying to tell this to the goth kids that I'm trying to hang out with, and I'm like, guys, this just isn't good, and they're getting mad at me because I only want to listen to the pop stuff. So it definitely was an interesting time, but when I look at now versus then, it's not that different
Mm.
because I'm still just kind of this loner who's only interested in what he's interested in, and then everything else I'm just kind of
I
eh.
mean, you're probably not the only person out there who's like that. But yeah, given your very various influences, what is your creative process like? Like, um, do you do everything yourself when you make music? Like the whole production and so on and so forth? Like, do you manage yourself by yourself? All that jazz.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly sort of doing 80 to 90% of the work. But starting around uh, 2017, 2018, I started really appreciating the power of collaboration and understanding that um, there really are only so many things that one person can be good at,
Hmm.
and it's it's very difficult to become yeah, a master of all things. And you know, when you're talking about music production, it's like it's songwriting, it's lyric writing, it's singing, it's production. It's like all of these things where how are you ever going to be able to be great at all of them? And so at some point around then I made it my focus to be like, okay, what am I? I'm a singer and I'm a songwriter.
Hmm.
And after I made that decision, all the rest kind of fell into place where I was like, okay, if I'm working on a song and I feel like the production's bad, I can, you know, hit up a friend and, you know, it's usually Chris John from Rotersand and say, hey, what would you do with this? How can we make this yeah, how can we make this song work? Or, you know, I have guitars and things like that. I'm really terrible at guitar, but I've found this just amazing uh, uh, sort of creative friendship with Sebastian from he was formerly in Lindemann. He's now playing in Hypocrisy, and then he's got his own band's Letters from the Colony. Fantastic guy, fantastic guitarist, and you know the power of collaboration can really help take a, a composition to the next level where it's greater than the sum of its parts. And it took me a really long time to understand that, to really sort of internalize it,
Hmm.
and also be mature enough to put my ego aside and say, if I didn't do everything on this song, then it's no longer mine. It's no longer good. I can no longer have the credit or the validation from it. Really, the goal is to make the best music possible. And if I need to bring other people in to serve that goal, then I absolutely uh, am happy to do it, and I enjoy the process now. So, I mean, I'm the creative director. I do as much as I possibly can, but I have no fear of bringing other people in, and I also kind of enjoy it.
Mm.
And a song never starts the same way. You sometimes it's a melody you hear in your head, sometimes it's a sound on a keyboard, sometimes it's a chord on a guitar, or sometimes it's a lyric that you just kind of pop into your phone notes while you're jogging. It's just it's the most important thing is understanding that inspiration can come at any time and anywhere, and that you need to figure out how to take that inspiration and then turn it into something tangible.
That makes sense. Um, as a follow up to the previous question, like obviously you just mentioned you pretty much do 90% of everything. How do you manage all of it, and do you have any suggestions for people who want to um, be young independent musicians, or not necessarily young but just independent musicians, and
Yeah.
kind of manage everything on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is no better time to be an independent musician than right here and now, because, you know, just 15 years ago, we didn't have the infrastructure that made it possible for somebody to really exist independently. You needed the labels, you needed the distribution chains, you needed the publicity, the publicists. Those things were necessary if you wanted to be heard. But today, we have this very unique moment in time where the internet and the distribution channels that are available to us makes the cost of entry almost nothing,
Mm.
right? Like you can sign up with a distributor like DistroKid for $20 a year, and you can make music on your crappy PC with cracked software or cheap software or anything like that. It's like there's never been a better time to be an artist. And I understand that there are problems with sort of the way royalties are paid out with streaming and things like that. Obviously, there could be a fairer system. I understand that the signal to noise ratio is insane. Like it's much harder to punch through, because if somebody checks out your song, they've probably forgotten it within 30 seconds after the song ends. Like these are challenges, but the challenges have always been there. And, you know, the payout systems have always been unfair. I mean, you just need to go through every sort of iteration of the music industry to see that um, big businesses have always found ways to extract money from artists,
Yeah.
but now those ways are getting smaller. So I think the best way to begin is just with baby steps and, you know, finish a song, release it, try working with social media, try connecting with people, try connecting to other artists, try to use the network that you have in order to grow connections with real people,
Mm.
because so many people today, or so many artists today, are obsessed with getting more listeners, more likes, more comments, all these types of things. Yeah, these things are good. These things help you, um, help your reach in terms of the algorithm. But really, what you want are genuine connections with real people who will follow your art, um, fervently. And, there's a lot of people who get a lot of streams and a lot of likes at the very beginning, but then it all sort of fades away because there was nothing real there. They didn't make genuine connections. So I think what artists need to do is utilize the power of the internet to make real connections with real people. And by doing that, you sort of set yourself up for long-term growth and stability as a creator.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can kind of relate to that myself because I know that there are a few people in my chat, especially that I pretty much owe everything to in terms of my current success here on Twitch. Um, so I can definitely kind of relate to what you're saying there. Um, but you also mentioned something about, the whole streaming music thing. Like, has um, how has the internet impacted the business? I know you briefly touched on it now, but like, how has it impacted the music industry? How has is it viable to stream? Like, you know, is it bad for music? Is it good for music? Is it somewhere in between?
I think that streaming is really the greatest thing to happen to the music industry probably ever. Because, as I said, there are complications, right? Like nothing is ever going to be perfect. I think a lot of people, um, focus too much on the negative aspects of the sort of streaming model that we're existing in
Hmm.
right now, and not really internalizing the benefits of it. Because, as I said, in the past, you would need a label to take a chance on you and invest tens of thousands of dollars to get your CD made, to get some hopefully decent press outlets to talk about you. Then you'd have to go on tour, grind it out for years and years and years just to see whether or not anybody gives a crap about what it is that you're doing. With the streaming model, you get this, feedback instantly.
Hmm.
And you also have the ability to, um, make sort of, let's say, you can make adjustments to your approach based on that information so much quicker than you could 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, right? Like in the past, it was like, okay, I'm gonna I'm signed now. Now I'm gonna go into a studio, I'm gonna record an album, and I'm gonna make it sound like this.
Hmm.
And now you've pushed all of your chips, all of your poker chips onto one sound or one concept. And if that doesn't work, then the label usually drops you and your career is over. Now you can explore all of your own wildest creative fantasies, put them out into the world and see if it connects with people. Maybe the thing that connects with people is not the thing that you thought would connect with people. So you just have this ability to like drop a song here, drop a song there, see what works. It's and tailor yourself not to the tastes of others in the sense of like selling out, right? Like, okay, this works, so I'm just going to do that. But
Hmm.
maybe you can discover things about your creative voice that you weren't even aware of. And I think that we are again in this very sort of special time where artists have the freedom to explore as long as they create an audience who is willing to go along for the ride. Like I consider myself to be the luckiest person in the world because I have, this amazing Patreon community who basically just supports me every single month, um, regardless of what I create,
Yeah.
right? Like, and when I did the 12 songs in 12 months project in 2021, um, you know, I shared all these songs with my patrons either as I was creating them or
Hmm.
early before the release, and not all of them liked every single song, but they were like, "Hey, I love this project. I love the philosophy. If I don't like this one, there's another one coming next month, right?" Like
I
it's about
honest,
fine, huh?
I honestly thought that you doing the whole 12 songs in a year um, project was like one of the coolest things ever because it was so different.
Yeah. But you can't do that if you're making an album, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
going into the studio and you're working with one producer to create what you hope will be the next sound because everybody wants to always revolutionize music. You
Hmm.
don't There's so much less weight to each individual release, where you can just put stuff out even if you're not sure about it. And like I said, um, the first song I put out, SEX,
Yeah.
uh, that was a song that I did not like. I did not appreciate it, but I was in this position where I'm like, uh, I need to release a song now. So it doesn't matter how I feel about it. I've just got to put it out there, because now I've got to move on to February and March and all the next songs that are coming down the pipeline. I didn't have the time to sit there and worry about cultivating the sound or
Hmm.
the image that I wanted to project out to the world. So I released SEX and it ends up becoming one of the most popular songs of my entire career.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. It sort of shows you, it reveals things to you as a creator about your own voice that you might not have even known. And of course, now I look back in hindsight, I understand why people like that song. But at the time, I was so stuck in my own mind and what I thought I needed to be. It's that feeling never goes away. So you have this reminder that it doesn't it's not all about you or your vision. It's about the sort of the connection that you bridge
Hmm.
with the world.
Yeah, I mean, that also kind of ties in with the next question I had lined up, which was, did you ever expect certain tracks to become bigger hits than they did, or vice versa?
Yeah, of course. Like, Automaton, I thought and still think is sort of the most perfect and distilled version of what I thought industrial pop should and could be. Like I was like, you got soft vocals, you got this really tight production, you've got soft vocals, and then you've got screaming, and then you've got like guitar but synths. And is it a guitar? Is it a synth? I was like, this is like everything that I want. It was like organic and robotic. And I was like, this is gonna be it. This is gonna be a massive hit. And it just goes, and then with Bark at the Moon, I was like, wow, I've just written this great song. It kind of reminds me of The Cure, which is this band that I really, really
Yeah.
love. And everybody kind of likes that vibe right now. I was like, this song is so well written. It's gonna go great. It's gonna be one of my biggest songs ever. And that's okay. You gotta go with the flow and understand again that what you think the world whatever you think the world sees you as is not accurate.
Hmm.
And you just have to let your creative voice go and let your ego go and just allow your music or your art to come out and then put it into the world and see what happens, because you'll very often be surprised.
That's some really solid advice that really applies to a lot of situations in life, I guess. Um, because I think a lot of people are afraid of putting themselves out there, um, and are often a bit too concerned about what other people think. I know that's the case for me sometimes.
I think we all sort of go through this, right? Like it's it's very hard to put something out into the world that is as personal as your art. Um, and especially one of the downsides of social media and the internet and this sort of insane accessibility that everybody has to
Hmm.
their favorite artists is that they feel like they have the right to be assholes. And people can be so brutal, but you also have to remember that these are just words on a screen.
Hmm.
And, these people would likely never say any of this to your face. And if they would, well, who cares? Because they're assholes and you don't want to be friends with them, or you don't want their business, or you don't want to be connected to these people anyways.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So just sort of understand, or what I try to remind myself is that you're never going to please everybody. And if you are playing to the gallery, as David Bowie said, you are not going to discover anything interesting. So if you are pissing people off, if you are making people angry and making people leave you really nasty comments on social media, then you can go, you know what? I must be doing something right.
Yeah, because if nothing else, they're noticing you, and there are some people who will say that sometimes bad publicity is better than no publicity because it gets people talking. Um,
Definitely.
so yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying there. Um, yeah, I mean, you mentioned before that sometimes you can randomly get inspired, like in pretty much any place, like when you're out jogging and stuff. Do you have any general inspirations, or is it just whatever pops into your head and you think this is gonna be good?
It's funny because people ask me a lot, like, how do you stay so inspired after doing this for so long?
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found actually is that I'm more inspired now than I was before because I feel like the longer you do this, the longer you are in a creative headspace, the more, let's say, aware you are of what can be a good inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like maybe 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought to sit down and write a song about imposter syndrome or things like this. Like I I just I just think that life never ceases to throw obstacles and difficulties at us, no matter how old or young you are. Like there are obstacles to be overcome, and I think that these obstacles serve as inspiration. And if you are open enough to listen to it, you can always be inspired.
Yeah, that makes really really good sense for sure, for sure. Um, I think it's just because to some people the whole inspiration thing can be so, oh, I must be inspired by something, and either they can't give a concrete answer or it's very general and vague.
Mm,
But then there are people like you who can see pretty much any opportunity as maybe a potential chance for inspiration somewhere, which I think is really great because I
yeah.
think it's rather undervalued. Um,
I mean, it's I think one of the biggest sort of obstacles to overcome as a creator is believing that you need to wait for inspiration to strike. Um, because that's not really the way most of this works.
mhm.
I forget exactly what it was, but Thomas Edison said, like, it's creativity is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. It's really just about getting down and doing it
Mhm.
because it's great to have ideas, but if you can't take the idea to a completed state, then it's worthless. And my phone is filled probably with thousands of notes with unused ideas. And that's okay because you have this like well of places to draw from.
Yeah.
But um it's also just meaning like, hey, no one's ever going to see the majority of these things.
Mhm.
And so it's like this inspiration is essentially wasted. And really my goal in life is to just get as much of that out as possible while I still can. And even on days when I don't feel like working, when I don't feel like singing, if I don't feel like whatever, it's like, no, you drink your morning coffee, you come in here and you work.
Hmm.
And and it it gets easier over time. And what I try to tell, sort of other producers or other songwriters who ask me, how do you finish something when you get stuck? Well, my best piece of advice would be imagine that somebody is standing next to you with $1 million in a suitcase and they go, finish this in 1 hour and you get this money. I guarantee you that each and every one of you would find some way to finish whatever it is you're working on, no matter how good or how bad it is, to get that $1 million.
Yeah,
And so
probably.
and so this is what I think about when I am sort of stuck in this creative rut where I'm like, where do I take this song? It's like, the guy's here with the suitcase with the $1 million. Okay, what do I do? All right. I guess I would just put a verse here. Okay, I guess I would make the chorus this, and then that sounds bad, so change that. Okay, and then you do it, and then you sort of come out of it, come out of the haze, and you're like, it's not so bad. Maybe it's great, but when you have no perspective, you're also really a terrible judge at what's good and what's bad. So my sort of philosophy these days is just to do it, get it out, and who gives a shit about the rest.
Mm. I love how someone in the chat is saying, "Don't underestimate my powers," and also someone saying, "I need something better than $1 million."
I mean, there's also the gun to the head. There's also the gun to the head version of this where somebody's like, "I'll kill you," but I try to keep it light.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean the world is sometimes depressing enough as it is.
Yeah.
Um, so like, you grew up in the U.S., which is very well known to be quite the vanity culture. Do you see yourself as vain? And how do you feel vanity works in the music industry?
Well, I mean, my band is called Aesthetic Perfection because
Yeah.
I grew up in this, world of incredibly vain people. Um, but that doesn't mean that I am immune to it. It probably means I'm even more susceptible to it. Of
Hmm.
course, I'm like incredibly vain, and so much of this is about what I do is about validating my ego and sort of giving myself permission to exist and trying to elevate my status. All of that really sort of just toxic, useless stuff that we humans like to do.
Hmm.
So, when I started, it was probably like so much of what I was doing was based on that. But as I get older, I try to understand that this is the way that I'm wired, and I try to actively work against it. I try to remind myself that it's really about the art and it's not about me. And I try to remain humble because I think that I'm an incredibly lucky person who just sort of the roll of the dice worked in my favor to a degree where I get to do this when so many other people might not have because of whatever circumstance life gave them. And so that helps keep my ego in check. That helps keep my vanity in check. And also as you get older, you become a little bit less vain just by by nature. And I'm almost 40 now, so
Hmm.
it's not the way it was when I was 20, where I was like, I gotta be like the big sexy rock star god, blah 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 blah. Now I'm just like can't even be bothered to shave half the time. So it's it's a combination of age and an attempt at philosophical wisdom.
Yeah, I mean there are some people who will say that the older you get, the less fucks you give.
Yeah. Or
Um,
you or as Mark Manson would say, you learn how to give the fucks about the right things,
yeah.
I actually just read that book, and I thought it was very interesting, this philosophy of uh give a fuck, but give a fuck about the right things, and then
Hmm.
don't waste your fucks on the stuff that you shouldn't give a fuck about.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Um, but yeah, it's like it's wild how much vanity really influences everything. Um, all in all, like across various cultures, like in both in the US and in Europe, and it's permeating pretty much everything. And it's wild, especially in this day and age where social media is all over the place, and like it's sometimes hard if you fall outside of the norm to kind of make it in a lot
Sure.
of circumstances. Um, like if you're not conventionally attractive or something. Um,
Yeah, I mean but I think it's just such a human thing,
yeah,
and I think social media just makes it worse. It's not to blame for this, and I know exactly what it feels like to not sort of fit the mold, and that was
hmm,
also part of my inspiration for the band name because I started losing my hair when I was 17,
mm,
and I was relentlessly bullied and teased and all that kind of stuff about it, and it was really really uh it was really really tough to learn how to accept myself and be confident with sort of the 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 body that I'm in as opposed to the body that I wish that I had. So I
yeah.
think everybody sort of deals with this in different ways. Um, but I think it's a very universal thing, and I think that social media just makes it worse.
It definitely, what's the word, magnifies it.
100%, yeah.
Um, but yeah, you mentioned how the best way to make it as a musician today is like by making contact with actual humans and not necessarily always just focus on the numbers and stuff. In along that side of things, I want to ask you like how relevant are DJs still for what you do, like whether it be online or in real life? Like, does it actually help your music get out there? Because I know that I personally on my DJ streams have played some bands that people have never heard of before.
Mm. That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to it. You know, I think before the pandemic, obviously nightlife was a much more important thing in people's social lives.
Yeah.
So obviously, scoring like a club hit was a very useful way of getting your name out there in a relatively fast way.
Hmm.
Um, but how that applies now in a post-pandemic world, I don't know because so many things have changed, so many things that I think we as not just creators but as sort of a society don't fully understand yet, and we're
Hmm.
still trying to um, pick up the pieces and figure it out. As I'm sort of very very quickly realizing uh, turnouts at live shows are terrible
Yeah.
now. People just don't go to clubs, don't go to concerts anymore, and I think clubs are um, feeling a very similar thing. But we're also seeing an explosion in sort of online engagement, online events, and how that translates to new listeners or promotion or all these sort of bigger business questions.
Hmm.
I I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. I think we're going to need a couple of years to actually figure it out or to reach some kind of stability where we know, okay, that works. Now let's like focus our attention in a promotional way in this direction, right?
Yeah. That makes total sense. Um, you mentioned the whole um, playing live shows being a problem. Like, how big of a problem is it? Because I know I've seen you make comments here and there about how you were worried it's not gonna be viable to do live touring anymore.
It's not. It's absolutely not. So, we just did our US tour. Um, I sort of calculated
Mm-hmm.
maybe a 20 to 30% reduction in turnouts.
Oh.
Um, uh, Not just because of the pandemic and people's sort of understandable health concerns, it makes total sense, but also um, the cost of living has been rising.
Mm-hmm.
There's a recession and
Oh
then there's
yes, for sure.
inflation. The cost of, at least in the US, petrol was through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the cost for crew and vehicles and all that kind of stuff for touring that had increased by 30 to 40%. And so, you're facing this serious uphill battle in terms of costs.
Mm-hmm.
And, we thought that, or I thought that I had sort of balanced it out in this way where it's like, okay, I probably won't, um, I won't make money, but this should still be good. We'll still
Yeah.
have good shows and things like that. It was terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible. Um, we're playing uh certain cities that we normally sell 150 tickets at, 30 people. Uh, Places we sell 300 tickets to, 70 people. We played in Chicago to like 98 people in a room that holds 800. This is a city that we normally sell 3 or 400 tickets for.
Oh
I mean,
wow.
In LA, we only got close to 300 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest show. New York had 80 people. Like Manhattan on a Friday, you know? So we're just like, I, it, I, I just reached this point where I was like, this is impossible
Mm.
because, I can, I'm not going to be arrogant enough to be like, well, I'm so good. All these people should still come and see me. But it's like when you look at the numbers, especially the 2019 tour, which was our most successful tour of our whole career,
Yeah.
the most turnout ever, selling out, I think, like a quarter of all the dates in the US, which was really, really good. Then to that, it's like, okay, there's something going on here. And then I started talking to other bands, I
Mm-hmm.
started talking to promoters, and it was like this trend is not just you. There are a lot of tours that are tanking that should not be tanking. So, you know, it just made me realize that sort of the bar for touring has been raised in terms of the people who are going to be able to afford it. And I think that what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is that you're going to see more festivals,
Mm-hmm.
smaller festivals pop up where people, where bands will, play, you know, there'll be like 50, there'll be a lot of bands playing and people will go to the festivals as opposed to going to see those bands play live because they can see more bands for less money
Mm.
and less time investment and all that kind of stuff. And then the bands that will be able to tour like regularly are going to be large legacy acts, like Depeche Mode and
Yeah.
The Cure and all that kind of stuff, and super hyped like newcomers like TikTok bands. But
Mm.
I think that that's also going to, like, those tours will do well, and then the bands will fall off unless they actually establish themselves and build a real career by making real connections.
Yeah.
Because hype dies, as I think a lot of people have seen. So I do think this sort of like touring middle class is over.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why I'm going to sort of step away from doing headlining tours. If we get offered to open for like a super big band, of course I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But this whole idea of just going out on the road and grinding it out for, 40, 50 people, as much as it's nice to get to perform for people and engage with them, it's just not something that you can afford to do anymore.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
so if I can do this for a while, focus on making new music videos, doing interviews like this, live stream events, whatever, then maybe the band grows and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it becomes viable to tour again. But as it is where the band is at now, it's just there's no way. There's just no way.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, both in terms of what it looks like from your side of the boat, but also for someone like me who consumes a lot of music just via listening, I also go to shows when I can afford it. It's not always possible on unlimited income, but when I can afford it, I definitely love going to shows, and I also don't mind traveling for them. People who know
Mm,
me know that I've quite frequently traveled to Germany to be able to see some of the bands I love because they rarely ever go to Denmark because we don't have
yeah.
that big of a scene.
Well,
Um,
Germany's is an interesting case study because they're feeling the the sort of impact of this, but not as bad
yeah.
because the people who work in the dark scene in Germany have built up this like very strong infrastructure,
Hmm.
which is very supportive of artists and really encouraging people to go out. But I don't know if this is going to last forever. I don't know if they're just sort of slowing down uh an eventually terminal infection. I don't know.
I mean, one can always hope for the best for the industry as as a general whole because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would miss gigs, and I'm also pretty sure that the whole festival solution that you kind of mulled over just before might not be viable for everyone. And it would be a shame to see gigs eventually become a luxury to people more than it already is, because let's face it, we've all seen some of the prices that certain bands go for on Ticketmaster, for instance.
Yeah, but that's the thing is this is just going to get worse because the costs of all of this stuff is just going to keep rising.
Yeah,
So a tour bus and hotels, and I mean if you look at hotel prices
yeah,
recently, it's just insane. So I think the only people who are going to be able to afford this are going to be the large bands, and of course they're going to pass this cost on to the consumer,
yeah,
right? So that's why you're going to be spending 200-300 bucks to go see Depeche Mode in the with the worst seats, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, as I said, I think it's a shame that it's going that direction because to me, art and music should be accessible to everyone, including seeing it live if possible.
I mean, it's tougher with live shows because obviously you're talking about not just the artists who need to make a living, it's also the crew and the venue and the staff and all of that kind of stuff. So it becomes a much more difficult question,
Yeah.
but I'm certainly a firm believer in the fact that there should be no barrier to art in general, which
Hmm.
is why I'm such a big um, supporter of streaming, which is why I give all of my music away for free on Bandcamp
Yeah.
because I want to make sure that the people who would like to enjoy my art but maybe cannot afford it, I want to make sure that they have access to it. And the people who can support it and want to help ensure that I can keep creating,
Hmm.
they either sign up for my Patreon or they'll spend $10 on one song on Patreon on Bandcamp. So
Yeah.
I think it's I've reached a place in my career where it really is awesome to have the financial support from the people who are able to do it so that I'm able to give the rest of it away to the people who can't.
Yeah. Definitely. I also think it's very interesting that you do the whole thing where you basically give your music away on Bandcamp. Like, if people want to pay, they can. It's not something I've come across that often.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do things differently than a lot of people, but I it works for me, and it's not like I just stumbled upon these things. This is a bunch of trial and error,
Yeah.
but I've been doing this for a really long time. So now it looks like I've got it all figured out, but really there's just like a million mistakes behind me that you don't see or don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, we live and learn, as they say.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So one more question, and then I gotta let you go.
yes. One last question.
Make it
Okay.
your best question, your favorite question, your most pressing question.
Oh. Oh, jeez. Um. Okay. This is one I also asked Matteo when I interviewed him. Are you a
Mhm.
brave person?
No, I'm actually a coward, I think. I'm terrified of so many things. I have crippling stage fright. I'm terrified of flying.
Hmm.
I'm terrified of change. I'm I think the only thing that I'm not terrified of is stuff like this, like public speaking. For some reason, I have absolutely no fear about getting on stage and talking to people. But if I have to like sing and perform, awful. If I have to get on a plane, awful. If I have to, have change to my routine, all that stuff, awful.
Hmm.
But it's not about not feeling fear. Like there's so many things in life that we are afraid of, but I think what makes life worth living is feeling that fear, embracing it, and doing it anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like just holding your breath and taking that leap of faith and realizing it's probably going to be okay. And I've tried to remind myself of this, almost every day of my life because I'm always confronted with new and terrifying things. But I've made it this far, so
Yeah,
I
knock
should
on
make
wood.
it should hopefully make it a little bit farther.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But yeah, thank you for doing the interview with me. It's
Absolutely.
much appreciated, and I really hope that I'll be able to catch you on tour before you do the whole retiring thing, regardless if it's gonna be at a show here in Denmark or if I have to travel to Germany. I'll come and see you live, that's a promise.
Well, we have a
Because
we
your
have a
gigs are
Copenhagen
amazing.
show, so hopefully it's not too far away from you.
No, I live an hour outside of Copenhagen by train, so all good. I'll come and see
All
you
right.
when you land here.
All
That's
right.
a
So then
promise.
we will see you in Copenhagen, and hopefully the rest of
Yes,
you, hopefully we'll see you somewhere else on the tour.
that's for sure. Well, thank you once again, and it was so nice having you here. Have a good
It was
one, and yeah, take care.
my pleasure. You all have a great evening, and hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, bye.
Bye bye.